Hello, I'm John Eldredge, and welcome to the Ransomed Heart audio podcast. For more information on Ransomed Heart Ministries, our resources and events, please visit us online at www.ransomedheart.com.
Okay, this is Craig McConnell, and Morgan and I are sitting here in front of some microphones talking, and if you hear this, it's because it turned into a podcast. So, Morgan.
Craig, good to see you, buddy.
So we're going to just kind of update you on what's current with our lives and what's going on, right?
Yeah.
You want to start? You want me to?
I'll start.
Go ahead.
About your life.
Oh.
Actually, we were just chatting before we stepped into the studio here just about what you've been thinking about these days, or I should say wrestling about. And you were talking about disruption and what you do when God disrupts you and how that's very different now than how you would have handled that 30 years ago or 15 years ago. I'd love to hear some more. What is disruption and what's going on with you right now?
Yeah. Gosh, in my story, Morgan, I think a turning point was when I went to a Larry Crabb, Dan Allender conference back in 1983. I went to learn how to be a better counselor. I was pastoring a church and was doing a lot of counseling and loved kind of helping people work through their lives, problems, obstacles, struggles. And so I went to this thing thinking I'd learn how to be a great counselor. And both Crabb and Allender spent about 40 hours instructing, teaching, kind of talking about things I had never heard before. Mm-hmm. And it just totally changed my worldview, my paradigm for thinking and understanding. And I begin to see that so much of my life has been committed to avoiding disruption. I'm risk adverse, and it just felt like the blessing of God was translated into life going well and smooth, and anything that would arise in your life, you'd be mature, holy, strong enough to face and deal without too many ruffles or ripples. And it was there that I began to realize that now actually it's lives that are disrupted, and it's the disruptions of life that God makes himself known. Read through the Gospels, and it's those who are hungry. Hunger would be disruption. It's those who are thirsty. It's those who are poor in spirit. And just begin to realize that, my gosh, it's actually in life's disruptions and its incongruencies, it's in its trials, it's in those difficult relationships and circumstances. That's where God works and moves. That's where you find him. Mm-hmm. And so I began just kind of shifting to realize that it's in what I would call the hard times or the emotional times or times of struggle and personal angst that I find God most often, and begin to kind of welcome disruption or made a friend with it, or maybe it's better to say was a little more at ease. Mm-hmm. And so I'm in one of those seasons right now, and have been, where there are circumstances and there are things unfolding that are just stirring up stuff in me and disrupting. Mm-hmm. And I think how I've changed is now I look for God, and I know how to process disruption. I know what to do with it. I don't want to sound more knowledgeable or more sagely than I am, but I have lived with disruption. I know that God's in it, and I know over the years how to kind of find him in it. Mm-hmm. I know what kind of questions to ask. So that's what I do. Mm-hmm. Where are you in this, God? What is it about this person? What is it about these circumstances that make me angry or frustrated or anxious or worried? Mm-hmm. What is it? And the focus moves from my disruptive world disruptive, discouraging people and circumstances to more my heart issues.
Mm-hmm.
Lord, what is it about me that you're after that is reacting so strongly to this?
Mm-hmm.
And then with eyes to see and ears to hear, kind of listen and look at what is it in me?
Yeah. Yeah, Craig, as you're sharing that, I think I'm aware that what you're talking about is pausing long enough to ask questions of yourself and ask questions of God in the midst of circumstances that are requiring some type of interpretation that could go one of several ways.
Right.
But I'm struck as you're sharing that it requires a lifestyle that values the space to really process what's going on rather than just pushing through or minimizing something. I mean, have you always been that way, or have you seen that develop also over time?
I don't know if it'd be space or just kind of honesty.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're to evaluate ourselves. We're to kind of take a look in the inside. And I've always been somewhat of a self-aware, reflective person. Yeah, I think that's a bit of who I am.
Craig, when you're talking about this disrupting, or it sounds like God thwarting some intention of yours or some expectation of yours, how do you understand that when it's that and it's not spiritual warfare, where the verse something like, the thief comes to steal and kill and destroy? Because I think sometimes it's hard to figure out, is this God thwarting me and I need to listen to him, or is it the enemy thwarting me and I need to fight against it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In general, speaking in general categories, Morgan, I think that every conflict, problem we have is multifaceted. I think in general, every problem that we would say is spiritual warfare also has a component of the soul in it. The enemy is going after some vulnerability in our heart, our being, our mind, a vulnerability that may have to do with our wounds, our worldview, or whatever. So there's always a warfare component. There's always a soul component. There's always a walking with God component. So in my mind, there's no issue that's purely, simply, usually, generally speaking, just warfare. So I think it was Kraft who said, if you've got a house full of rats, the way to deal with the problem is get rid of the rats and then clean the house so they don't come back. And I think the cleaning, we do warfare, we remove agreements, spiritual strongholds, foul spirits, so on and so forth, and then we do the work of cleaning the house, which is soul work.
Yes.
So I'm always interpreting the struggles I'm having as some component of brokenness, woundedness, sin, naivete, not knowing how to walk with God in this, and warfare.
Yes.
That's how I view everything.
Yes. Yeah, it makes me think of the scripture as you're sharing, John 14, verse 30, when Jesus says to his disciples, I will not speak with you much longer, for the prince of this world is coming. He has no hold on me. And, boy, I just love that, to think that Jesus knew that the evil one was real, and yet he lived a life that the enemy could find no place in him, in any of those categories you just mentioned, where it would stick, whether it was sin or woundedness. And, boy, that's the life I want, is to become whole enough that when the warfare comes, I can treat it as warfare and be able to live accordingly, rather than the warfare comes and I just get so taken out because it's attaching to wounded places, places I've given access to, agreements, and anger towards other people, self-condemnation. So just to be whole and holy seems like a real path of life.
Thank you for listening. There's no doubt that your life has been or will be disrupted. And, of course, our hope and prayer is that you would find God in it. and that you would have a sense of where he is, what he's doing, what he's after in these disruptions, and you'd be encouraged in your walk with Christ. And for more resources like this, you can go to our iTunes store or ransomedheart.com.